Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really critical cybersecurity threat. There's this joint advisory out, and it really pulls back the curtain on how the Russian GRU, specifically their Unit 26165, has been, well, aggressively targeting Western logistics and tech companies since 2022. And these are the very organizations playing a vital role in aid to Ukraine.
Exactly. And this isn't just, random hacking. It seems like a very calculated effort by a state actor to get inside and potentially mess with the flow of essential support.
Oh.
So our mission today really is to unpack the core findings of this advisory. It's a
Hi.
big collaboration from several international cybersecurity agencies. We want you to really grasp the extent and the nature of this ongoing threat.
Okay, let's break this down then. The range of targets. It sounds pretty wide. It's not just one kind of company they're going after, is it?
No, not at all. That's right.
Yeah.
The advisory highlights logistics providers like across the board, air, sea, rail. Think about the companies running the ports, the airports, the transport networks. Critical stuff.
Mhm.
And they're also hitting technology companies. That includes government orgs, but also private sector ones, especially like IT service providers. And the geographical spread is significant. We're talking targets confirmed in Bulgaria, Czech Republic, France, Germany, Greece, Italy, Moldova, Netherlands, Poland, Romania, Slovakia, Ukraine, and yes, even the U.S.
Wow.
So yeah, it really underscores that this is a big international campaign.
So what's the main goal here? Are they trying to cause chaos or is it more, strategic?
The advisory leads heavily towards cyber espionage, gathering intelligence.
Hmm.
The GRU unit seems really focused on understanding these logistics and tech support networks. But there's this other angle, which is honestly pretty unsettling.
Okay.
A potential secondary objective, monitoring aid shipments. And how? Through compromised IP cameras that starts to blend the digital intrusion with, physical surveillance. It's a very concerning mix, really characteristic of modern hybrid threats.
Wait, hang on. Hacking into security cameras, that feels different, like a major step, merging cyber tactics with eyes on the ground.
It is fascinating, isn't it? That potential convergence. The advisory strongly suggests this connection between hitting the logistics firms, learning their routes, schedules, cargo, and this wider campaign targeting IP cameras,
Yeah.
especially cameras in Ukraine and neighboring NATO countries.
Right.
The kind of intel they could get from those cameras, actually seeing supplies move,
Hmm.
it adds a real-time physical layer to the intelligence they're grabbing through cyber means.
Hmm.
It really highlights this integrated nature of hybrid threats, where cyber and physical are used together.
That really sharpens the focus on the stakes here. If you're working in logistics or tech, this isn't some abstract thing happening far away. It could directly impact your operations, the whole supply chain security. So, okay, where do these attacks start? How are they getting that first foot in the door?
Well, the advisory lays out a whole variety of initial access tactics. One method that keeps popping up is credential guessing or brute force.
Just trying passwords.
Yeah, but they're pretty sophisticated about it. They use anonymizers like Tor, VPNs, constantly rotating their IP addresses. And they always wrap their traffic in TLS encryption to make it harder to spot.
So they're actively masking their tracks right from the beginning. What about phishing emails? Are those still a big factor?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Spear phishing is still highly effective for them. This GRU unit sends emails with links, right? And these links go to what look like legitimate login pages for government sites or common cloud providers.
Hmm.
But these fake pages, they're often hosted on free web services or, and this is alarming, on compromised social devices,
Yeah.
small home office routers.
Wow, okay.
And they tailor the email themes to make them seem relevant, more convincing. It's that mix of social engineering and tech deception, a real hallmark of their approach in this hybrid threat space.
It's that attention to detail that makes it work, isn't it? Making the fake pages look spot on, using topics the targets care about. It's like manipulating psychology on a large scale.
Precisely. Yeah. And they're clever about delivering these attempts too. Some use multi-stage redirectors. These actually check your IP address, even your browser fingerprint.
What, like, it's to see if you're a researcher?
Exactly. If it looks like you might be security or just not the intended target, boom, you get sent off to a harmless site like MSN.com. It helps them hide their real credential harvesting setup from anyone investigating. They've used services like webhook.site, FryGIO for this kind of thing.
That's almost like a digital smokescreen for their attacks. And it's not just stealing usernames and passwords, right? They're also pushing actual malware through phishing.
Yes, definitely. The advisory calls out Headlace and MaceAP specifically as malware seen used against logistics victims. They also use scripts like BD files, VBScript, and send links that look like simple shortcuts but actually lead to compromise.
So credentials and malware. Multiple paths in.
Right. Gives them options.
And of course, you can't talk cyber threats today without talking about vulnerabilities, exploiting software flaws. What CVEs are they leveraging?
Several key ones. That Outlook NTLM vulnerability. CVE 2023-23397, that's a big one. They use these crafted calendar invites to grab NTLM hashes. Think of those as encrypted passwords that sometimes can be cracked or reused.
Right, I remember that one.
They've also gone after vulnerabilities in Roundcube webmail, CVE 2020-12641, CVE 2020-35732, CVE 2021-440206. Those could let them run commands on the server, get into email data.
Sure.
And more recently, they've been hitting a WinRR vulnerability, CVE 2023-38831, that use specially made archive files sent in emails to run malicious code.
Those file names you mentioned earlier, calp.war.zip, newsweek6.zip, they sound so ordinary.
Exactly. Designed to look harmless, slip past user suspicion. And it's not just desktop software flaws. The advisory also points to them exploiting internet-facing gear like corporate VPNs, using known public vulnerabilities, SQL injection, ways to potentially just bypass the outer defenses altogether.
And you mentioned SO8 devices earlier. How do those fit into the bigger picture?
Yeah, that's particularly interesting from that hybrid threat angle we talked about. They compromise these small office or home routers, and once they control them, they can use these devices for, well, covert ops. It gives them a launch point that's geographically close to the target, often less monitored.
Another layer of hiding.
Exactly. Adds anonymity, makes attribution tougher. It's like using the edges to attack the center.
So, okay, they've managed to get that initial foothold. What happens next? What are they doing once they're inside?
Reconnaissance. That's job one. As soon as they're in, they start digging for information. Contact details for key people, especially cybersecurity folks, transport coordinators, details about business partners, too.
Why partners?
They're looking to exploit trust relationships. Use the access they have in one place to maybe pivot into connected organizations. Lateral movement is key for these APT groups.
So it's not just hitting one company. It could be a beachhead to get into others in the supply chain.
Precisely. And for moving around inside a network they've compromised, they use a mix of built-in Windows commands and open-source tools. Things like Impacket, PSExec, sometimes the compile.exe versions, sometimes Python scripts.
Standard tools, often.
Right, living off the LAN, partly.
Sure.
They also use RDP, remote desktop, to jump between machines. And they try to dump the Active Directory database, the ntds.dit file. That holds credentials for, well, potentially the whole network.
That's going for the crown jewels, isn't it? Getting Active Directory access.
Absolutely. And their toolkit has more. Tools like CertipB, AID Explorer, to pull even more info from AD. They've even been seen installing Python on compromised systems just to run CertipB.
Wow.
Before they try to pull data out, they usually zip it up, compress it, then try to exfiltrate it using various methods, sometimes using OpenSSH tools they deployed earlier.
Sounds methodical. Stealthy, but systematic. What about maintaining access and gathering more intel over time?
Keeping persistent access to email seems really important to them. They mess with mailbox permissions. They've even been seen enrolling compromised accounts into MFA systems, but MFA, they control just to keep that long-term email access.
That's clever in a scary way.
Yeah. They also use Python scripts like getjpppassword.pa to snag passwords sometimes stored insecurely in group policy preferences, a known bad practice. And a modified ldap-dump.ps script to find more user accounts and try password spraying over LDAP.
Password spraying, trying common passwords against many accounts.
Exactly. And to hide what they're doing, they actively try to wipe event logs using the webtoodle command, covering their tracks.
It's a multi-pronged strategy, really. Get in, stay in, grab sensitive data, and specifically data about shipments.
Yes. They seem particularly interested in accounts that can see sensitive shipment details. Things like who's sending what to whom, transport IDs, origin, destination, container numbers, routes, and crucially, what's in the cargo. This feeds directly into that likely goal of tracking aid, maybe finding weak spots in the logistics chain. Fits perfectly with the broader goals in a hybrid conflict.
And that voice phishing attempt you touched on, impersonating IT. Just another layer of social engineering.
Exactly. Pretending to be IT support to trick someone into giving up privileged access. It just shows they'll blend technical hacks with human manipulation, whatever it takes to reach their goals in this complex threat landscape.
Let's talk a bit more about the malware itself. You mentioned Headlace and Macy hitting logistics firms. What do we know about them?
Well, the advisory doesn't give super deep technical dives on each one, but it highlights their roles: initial access, persistence, getting data out. The fact that they might use several different malware types against one target just shows how adaptable they are. Could be layered infections. They also use a technique called DLL search order hijacking to make sure their malicious code runs.
Okay. And Ocean Map and Steelhook. And they haven't hit logistics yet, but the advisory flags them. Why is that significant?
That's a really important point for understanding how this threat might evolve. Because these other malware families have been used against different targets in Ukraine and the West, it's logical to assume the GRU could easily turn them against logistics and IT if they wanted to.
So anticipate future moves, not just react to past ones.
Exactly. It speaks to the adaptive nature of these hybrid threat actors. They have a toolbox they can draw from.
Staying in is obviously crucial for them. Besides messing with mailbox permissions, what other ways do they make sure they can get back in?
They use a range of pretty standard persistence tricks, creating scheduled tasks to run their malware regularly, modifying registry run keys so their stuff starts automatically when the system boots up, and planting malicious shortcut files in the startup folder. These help their access survive reboots, user logoffs, that kind of thing.
And ultimately, it's about getting the data out. What are their main exfiltration techniques?
It's a diverse mix. They use their custom malware, but also legitimate tools already on the system, living off the land binaries, as we call them. PowerShell gets used a lot to prep data, like creating those ZIP archives we mentioned.
Yeah, bundling it up.
Yeah. And for getting emails out, they use server protocols and APIs like EWS, IMP. They even set up recurring EWS queries to just automatically pull down new emails as they come in.
That's pretty efficient for maintaining a constant flow of stolen info.
What's really notable, though, is how hard they try to stay hidden during exfil. They often use infrastructure geographically close to the victim. They might wait long periods between sending data out, trying to blend in with normal traffic. They use trusted common protocols, and they might even route traffic through other compromised local systems to obscure the origin point. That focus on stealth is key for their long-term hybrid ops.
Okay, let's loop back fully to those IP cameras. How does that activity, which seems almost separate, connect to the logistics and tech targeting?
The advisory makes a pretty strong case that compromised private IP cameras, the ones near borders, military sites, rail hubs, and also publicly accessible traffic cameras, are very likely being used to physically track aid movements towards Ukraine.
Ah, so the visual confirmation.
Exactly. It complements the cyber spying they're doing on the logistics companies. It gives them a fuller picture of the supply chain, this fusion of cyber intel and physical surveillance. That's a core part of modern hybrid threats.
So they're trying to get like a 360-degree view, digital and physical.
Precisely. And this campaign targeting RTSD servers, the protocol often used for camera streams, has been going on for a while, since at least March 2022. They're trying to find vulnerable cameras, get access to live feeds by sending these RTSP describe requests. And often these requests include default credentials encoded in base 64. So they're trying default passwords, brute forcing cameras that haven't been secured properly.
Simple but effective if defaults aren't changed.
Right. And look at where these targeted cameras are. Overwhelmingly in Ukraine, but also significant numbers in Romania, Poland, key transit countries for aid. It strongly backs up the theory they're watching the aid flows.
That example RTSP request you mentioned, it really shows how directly they're probing for these weaknesses.
Yeah, it's basically them knocking on the camera's door saying, tell me about yourself, and often including the key, a common default username and password, hoping the door just opens. A 200 OK response means they're likely watching the feed.
This paints a really concerning picture, a persistent, multi-layered, threat-blending cyber and physical spying. So what can organizations actually do? What are the concrete steps, the main mitigations recommended in the advisory?
Right. The advisory gives a lot of solid advice. It breaks it down into general security, identity management, and specific IP camera security. For general security, network segmentation is huge, and really leaning into zero trust principles.
Assume breach, basically.
Pretty much. They stress host firewalls, network security appliances, and definitely automated auditing of access logs. And for orgs with on-prem stuff, blocking NTLM and SMB protocols, talking to the outside world is critical to stop credential relay attacks.
And EDR, endpoint detection and response, that feels absolutely fundamental here given the malware they use.
Oh, completely. EDR, plus doing proper threat modeling to figure out how they might attack you, is essential for detection and response. The advisory also hammers on collecting and actively watching Windows logs. especially watching for signs someone cleared the logs.
A classic indicator.
And enable those built-in Windows security features, attack surface reduction rules, limit script execution, use constrained PowerShell. These can block a lot of common attack vectors. Application and script allow listing, using Sigma rules for detection. Those are key defensive layers too.
And for the phishing side, enhanced browsing protection, safe links checks.
Definitely. Plus, watching logins closely. Maybe block or alert on logins from public VPNs, especially if they seem to come from your own country. User education is always important, stressing not to use personal accounts for work, being suspicious of unexpected login prompts.
Right.
And the advisory even lists specific hosting and API services this GRU unit uses. So maybe consider blocking or closely monitoring traffic to those known bad spots.
Okay, moving to identity and access management, what are the big priorities there?
Strong MFA. Multi-factor authentication. Ideally, moving to things like passkeys or hardware tokens, PKI smart cards. Much more robust.
Getting away from just passwords.
Exactly. Limit privileged accounts strictly. Monitor them constantly, separate those privilege roles. Reducing reliance on passwords overall, maybe through single sign-on, is a good goal. For on-prem, plan to get rid of NTLM authentication entirely. It's old, it's insecure.
Big project for some, but necessary.
Yes. And definitely stop storing passwords in group policy preferences. Clean those out if they exist. Use account throttling, limiting login attempts rather than just locking accounts out, which can cause denial of service. Check passwords against breached databases like have I been pwned? Change all default credentials. Disable weak, old authentication protocols. Basic hygiene, but critical.
And what about specifically securing those IP cameras?
First off, make sure your cameras are supported by the vendor, get security updates, and actually apply them. Patching is crucial.
Right.
Disable remote access if you don't absolutely need it. If you do need it, protect it. Use firewalls, whitelist allowed IPs, require VPN and MFA. Turn off features like UPnP, P2P, anonymous visit modes. Disable unused ports and services on the camera itself.
Reduce the attack surface.
Precisely. If the camera supports authenticated RTSP, enable that. Regularly review who has access, audit the accounts, and set up logging on the cameras and actually monitor those logs for weird activity.
The advisory also lists indicators of compromise, IOCs. How should security teams use that list?
Yeah, and they rightly add a caution. Don't rely only on IOCs. They change fast. Actors use shared infrastructure.
So context is key.
Exactly. But the list of legitimate tools, anti-Sutil, WebTootle, 8 Explorer, is a good reminder that unusual use of normal tools can be a red flag. The malicious scripts they name, like certip or getgpppassword.py, those are stronger indicators to hunt for. Same for the suspicious command lines, the Outlook CVE IOCs, the webmail providers they favor. They're all useful pieces for threat intelligence, for proactive hunting. That list of brute-forcing IPs, even if time-limited, gives you something concrete to investigate. But you need to build behavioral detections, heuristics, not just block every IOC, or you'll drown in false positives, especially with legitimate admin tools.
And they even provide Yara rules.
Yes, which is great. Rules to spot things like a custom NTLM listener, the headlace and MCP malware, steelhook, generic P6X use. These give security teams actual tools to scan their systems, hunt for signs of these specific attacks that might have slipped past other defenses. Very practical.
Now, the cybersecurity world uses different names for this group, right? Why is that, and what are the common ones we should know?
Yeah, that's common. Different research orgs have their own tracking systems, naming conventions. So while the U.S. government might call them GRU Unit 26165, you'll often see them called APT28, Fancy Bear, Forest Blizzard, or Blue Delta in industry reports.
Okay.
It's just important to know these different names refer to, broadly, the same actor, so you can connect threat intel from various sources.
Finally, the advisory links to some extra resources.
It does. There's a link to a Microsoft script to help find malicious emails related to that CVE 2023-23397 Outlook bug, and also a link to a public Yara rule on GitHub for detecting impacket, that lateral movement tool they use a lot. Both are really useful for security teams wanting to take immediate steps to check their exposure and boost detection.
Okay, so let's just reiterate that key takeaway here. The Russian GRU, Unit 26165, is definitely still a major evolving hybrid threat, specifically targeting Western logistics and tech sectors involved in supporting Ukraine.
Absolutely right. This is a persistent adaptive spying campaign, and it has the very real potential to cause serious operational problems, compromise sensitive data. Taking proactive security steps, keeping up continuous monitoring like the advisory details, It's not just recommended anymore. It's pretty much essential for defending against this kind of ongoing threat.
So for you, our listeners, especially if you're in these targeted sectors, logistics, tech, supporting aid efforts, the message is really clear. You need to review this advisory fully. You need to implement these mitigations urgently. This isn't theoretical. It's an active campaign hitting your industry, blending cyber attacks with potential physical spying.
And maybe this leaves you with a question to think about. We know global supply chains are incredibly interconnected. We see these hybrid threats evolving. So how can organizations really collaborate better? Maybe through more open information sharing, maybe through collective defense strategies. How do we build a truly resilient defense against state-sponsored spying targeting critical logistics? It's definitely a complex challenge. It needs proactive thinking and probably a lot more collaborative action.